Imagine tides so immense they could surge miles inland, reshaping continents on a daily basis. Picture a night sky where two brilliant moons race across the heavens, sometimes eclipsing each other in a celestial ballet of light and shadow. Think about a world where the very ground beneath your feet might feel the constant, restless tug of two gravitational giants, potentially leading to more frequent earthquakes and volcanic upheavals. Number 9. Days that stretch and shrink. Altered time itself. Our planet's spin, the very thing that defines our day and night, isn't a fixed, unchanging constant. Right now, our one familiar moon is playing a slow cosmic game of tug-of-war with Earth, a game that gradually lengthens our days. This happens because the moon's gravity pulls on Earth's oceans, creating tidal bulges. As Earth rotates, it tries to drag these bulges along with it, but the moon's gravity resists, pulling back. This constant friction acts like a gentle brake on Earth's rotation, causing our planet to spin a tiny bit slower over vast stretches of time. Millions of years ago, a day on Earth was much shorter. Now, introduce a second moon into this equation. What happens then? The scenario becomes far more complex. If this second moon also orbited Earth in the same direction as our planet's spin, which is typical for natural satellites, it too would exert its own tidal forces. It too would raise its own set of tidal bulges, and it too would contribute to slowing Earth's rotation. With two moons pulling, the rate at which Earth's days lengthen could be significantly accelerated. What took our single moon eons to achieve could happen much faster with a celestial partner. The size and distance of this second moon would matter immensely. A large, close second moon would have a dramatic effect, possibly leading to a much more rapid increase in day length over geological history. Conversely, a small, distant second moon would have a more subtle influence. The interplay between the two moons would also be crucial. Their gravitational forces could combine, or at certain points, partially counteract each other, leading to fluctuations in the rate of Earth's rotational slowing. Think about the very early Earth, when days were perhaps only a few hours long. Presence of two moons could have meant that Earth reached its current 24-hour day length much sooner in its history, or perhaps it would have spun down even further, leading to days that are much longer than what we experience now. If one moon was in a retrograde orbit, orbiting opposite to Earth's spin, a very unusual but not impossible scenario, its effect could even be to speed up Earth's rotation, or at least counteract some of the slowing from the other moon. The details of their masses, orbits, and relative positions would write the story of Earth's day. This altered day length, whatever it turned out to be, would have profound ripple effects. The development of life, especially complex life with circadian rhythms tuned to light and dark cycles, would have proceeded along a different timeline. Longer or shorter days would influence global wind patterns, weather systems, and even the distribution of heat across the planet's surface. The very rhythm of life, the fundamental tick-tock of the planetary clock, would be set to a different beat, all because of an extra companion in our night sky. And as Earth's rotation changes, so do the orbits of the moons. As Earth slows, it transfers angular momentum to the moons, causing them to gradually drift further away. Two moons mean this entire cosmic dance of energy and momentum exchange would be a far more intricate performance. Number 8. The threat of celestial destruction. Moon vs. Moon. Our solar system is often perceived as a place of serene clockwork order, but it can also be a place of immense violence and chaotic change, especially when multiple gravitational bodies interact. Introducing a second moon into Earth's orbit isn't just about adding another pretty light in the sky. It's about adding a new, powerful player in a complex gravitational game And sometimes, games like these don't end well for all participants. One of the first concerns with two moons is orbital stability. The three-body problem predicting the motion of three celestial objects under their mutual gravitational influence is famously complex, and often has no neat, predictable solutions. With Earth, our familiar moon, and a second moon, we have exactly this scenario. Depending on their relative masses, distances, and orbital inclinations, the two moons could gravitationally perturb each other over time. These small tugs, accumulating over millions of years, could gradually destabilize their orbits. What could this destabilization lead to? Several dramatic possibilities arise. The moons could be nudged into orbits that eventually cross, leading to a catastrophic collision. Imagine two celestial bodies, each potentially hundreds or thousands of miles across, smashing into each other in Earth's vicinity. Energy released would be unimaginable. Such an impact would create a massive cloud of debris, a mixture of vaporized rock and molten fragments. Some of this debris would be blasted into new orbits around Earth, perhaps forming a spectacular ring system, or coalescing into new, smaller moonlets. A significant amount, however, would inevitably rain down upon Earth, leading to an intense period of bombardment, potentially triggering mass extinctions and drastically altering the planet's surface and atmosphere. Another unsettling prospect is the Roche limit. This is the distance from a celestial body, like Earth, within which a second body, like a moon, held together only by its own gravity, will be torn apart by the first body's tidal forces. If one of the moons, through orbital decay or perturbations from the other moon, strayed too close to Earth and crossed inside its Roche limit, it would begin to disintegrate. Earth's gravity would stretch it and rip it asunder, transforming the once solid moon into a stream of rubble. This rubble would then likely spread out to form a magnificent ring system, similar to Saturn's, but around our own planet. While visually stunning, such rings would not be entirely benign. Material from the rings would constantly, slowly, spiral inwards and burn up in Earth's atmosphere, potentially altering its composition or even leading to a sustained meteor shower visible across the globe. There's also the chance that one moon could be ejected entirely from Earth's orbit. Close gravitational encounter between the two moons, or a complex interaction with Earth, could give one moon enough of a gravitational kick to send it hurtling out into the solar system, becoming a rogue object, or eventually being captured by another planet or the Sun. The remaining moon would then find its own orbit significantly altered by the encounter. The sky would suddenly seem emptier, and the Earth system would be forever changed by the loss. The dance of two moons is a delicate one, and the misstep of one could lead to its dramatic demise or banishment. Number 7. Navigating by a dual lunar compass. For millennia, long before the invention of GPS or even the magnetic compass, humans looked to the heavens for guidance. The sun, the stars, and our solitary moon were the original celestial navigators, helping sailors cross vast, featureless oceans, and travelers find their way across unmapped lands. The moon, with its predictable phases and path across the sky, was a particularly useful tool. Now imagine a world where navigators had not one, but two moons to consult. This dual lunar system would present both new opportunities and new complexities for anyone trying to determine their location or direction. Each moon would have its own unique orbital period, its own cycle of phases, and its own apparent path through the constellations. A skilled navigator would need to learn the individual characteristics of both moons, perhaps keeping detailed charts and tables for each one. The presence of two moons could, in some ways, make celestial navigation more robust. If one moon was new and thus invisible, or obscured by clouds, the other might still be visible and usable. Having two independent celestial markers could provide a way to cross-check calculations and potentially achieve greater accuracy. For instance, the relative positions of the two moons to each other and to background stars could offer new methods for determining longitude, which was historically a very challenging problem. Specific alignments or conjunctions of the two moons might be rare but highly precise navigational events. However, the complexity would also increase significantly. The interplay of light from two moons, each potentially in a different phase, could make identifying fainter stars more difficult on some nights. Gravitational influences of two moons would also mean that predicting tides, essential knowledge for coastal navigation, would become a much more intricate calculation, as we'll explore later. Navigators would need to understand how the tidal effects of each moon combined, or sometimes canceled each other out. Different cultures might even develop preferences for navigating by one moon over the other, perhaps based on its brightness, the simplicity of its cycle, or cultural traditions. One moon might be the navigator's friend, while the other, perhaps with a more erratic apparent path due to a more inclined or eccentric orbit, might be considered less reliable or even a bringer of ill omen for journeys. The very art and science of navigation would evolve differently. The tools, the techniques, the almanacs, and the seafaring lore would all bear the imprint of a sky graced by two lunar guides. Think of the Polynesians' master navigators who used subtle clues from waves, stars, and our single moon to explore vast stretches of the Pacific. With two moons, their system of knowledge would be even richer and more complex. They might identify specific moon paths on the water for each lunar body, noting how the reflected light of each moon interacted with the ocean swells. The night sky, already a canvas of stories and directions, would become doubly intricate, a celestial map with twice the number of primary betes. The challenge would be greater, but for those who mastered it, the rewards of understanding this dual lunar system would be a profound connection to the cosmos and a reliable means to traverse their world. Number 6. Double the deities, double the stories. Cultural overhaul. Humans are pattern-seeking, storytelling creatures. For as long as we have looked up at the night sky, we have woven tales about the celestial bodies we see. Our single moon is a star in countless myths, legends, poems, and religions across the globe. It has been a god, a goddess, a symbol of love, madness, mystery, and time. Now, try to fathom the sheer explosion of cultural creativity if humanity had evolved under the gaze of two moons. The mythologies of the world would be fundamentally different. Instead of a single lunar deity or a sun-moon duality, pantheons might feature twin lunar gods or goddesses, perhaps rivals, lovers, or siblings with contrasting personalities and domains. One moon, perhaps the larger or brighter one, might be associated with power, hunting, or kingship. The second, perhaps fainter or with a more irregular cycle, might be linked to magic secrets, the underworld, or trickery. Their interactions in the sky, their conjunctions, their eclipses of each other, would be interpreted as divine dramas, messages, or omens, shaping rituals, festivals, and societal beliefs. Calendrical systems, many of which are based on lunar cycles, would become far more elaborate. Would societies try to reconcile the cycles of both moons into one calendar? Or would there be competing calendar systems, each tied to a different moon? This could lead to complexities in agriculture, religious observances, and even civil administration. The very concept of a month might be different, perhaps longer, if based on a combined cycle, or there might be two distinct types of months. Imagine trying to predict festivals that depend on the alignment of both moons with certain stars, a task for specialized astronomer priests. Art and literature would be immeasurably enriched, or at least profoundly altered. depictions of the night sky would always feature these two luminous companions. Love poems might compare a beloved's eyes to the twin moons. Tales of werewolves or other lunar-influenced transformations would have to contend with two sources of lunar influence, perhaps leading to creatures that transform more frequently or in different ways depending on which moon is dominant, or if both are full. The symbolism of the night would be irrevocably tied to this dual presence. Even language would reflect this reality. We have words like lunatic and moonstruck. What new words and idioms would arise from a two-moon world? Perhaps terms for the specific light quality when both moons are full, or for the eerie darkness when one eclipses the other. Our understanding of time, of cycles of feminine and masculine principles, of light and shadow, would all be filtered through the lens of this double lunar presence. The stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the universe would have two central shining protagonists in the night, their celestial dance a constant source of inspiration, awe, and narrative invention. The entire tapestry of human culture, from the grandest religions to the simplest folk tales, would be woven with threads from not one, but two moons. Number 5. Creatures of the Twilight. An evolutionary myrmix. Life on Earth has evolved over billions of years, exquisitely tuned to the rhythms of our planet, including the cycle of sunlight and the dimmer, more subtle light of our single moon. The presence of a second moon, particularly if it were significantly bright, would throw a massive variable into this evolutionary equation, especially for creatures of the night and those that live in the intertidal zones. Consider nocturnal animals. Many have developed highly sensitive eyes to navigate and hunt in low-light conditions. With two moons, the baseline level of nighttime illumination would often be much higher. On nights when both moons are full, or close to full, the landscape might be bathed in an ethereal silvery glow, far brighter than any moonlit night we know. This could dramatically shift the advantage between predator and prey. Prey animals that rely on darkness to hide might find themselves more exposed, forcing them to develop new camouflage strategies or become even more wary. Predators that use stealth under the cover of darkness might find hunting more challenging, or they might adapt to become more effective in these brighter nights. Some species might even shift their activity patterns. Animals that are strictly nocturnal in our world might, in a two-moon world, become more crepuscular, active during the twilight hours of dawn and dusk to avoid the brighter midnight periods. Conversely, some diurnal daytime animals might find the brighter nights offer opportunities to extend their foraging or activity times, blurring the lines between night and day. The very definition of night would change for these organisms. Then there are the biological rhythms. Many organisms, from insects to mammals to plants, have internal clocks, circadian rhythms, that are synchronized by light cues. Complex interplay of light from two moons, with their potentially different phases and orbital periods, could create a more complicated light environment. How would this affect mating behaviors, which are often timed by lunar cycles in many marine species, like corals or grunionfish? With two moons, these species might have to adapt to two different lunar cues, or perhaps one moon's influence would become dominant. Spawning events could become more frequent or more chaotic, or tied to the combined phases of both moons. The increased tidal ranges and complexity driven by two moons would also exert powerful evolutionary pressures on coastal and intertidal life. Organisms living in these zones would need to cope with much more extreme fluctuations in water level, salinity, and exposure. This could lead to species with greater resilience, perhaps with the ability to survive longer periods out of water, or to anchor themselves more securely against stronger currents. The zonation of life on rocky shores, that clear banding of different species at different heights, would be stretched out over a much larger vertical range. Even plants could be affected. The timing of flowering or seed dispersal in some species is influenced by subtle light cues, including moonlight. A brighter, more variable nocturnal light environment could alter these ancient rhythms. Over geological times, scales these accumulated pressures would sculpt life in myriad ways, leading to a biosphere that is both familiar in its fundamental processes, but distinctly different in its details, its species, and its ecological relationships, all because of the presence of a second guiding light in the terrestrial night. Number 4. Earth's wobble and shifting climate zones. Our planet isn't a perfectly stable spinning top. It wobbles. This wobble, known as axial precession, and the changes in its axial tilt, obliquity, are influenced by the gravitational poles of the Sun and our Moon. These are the Milankovitch cycles, and they play a significant role in long-term climate change, including the triggering of ice ages. Our Moon, in fact, has a remarkably stabilizing effect on Earth's axial tilt, keeping it within a relatively narrow range, which contributes to a more stable climate than we might otherwise have. Now, add a second moon to this delicate gravitational dance. Consequences for Earth's axial tilt and precession could be profound. Depending on the mass and orbit of this second moon, its gravitational influence could either enhance the stabilizing effect of our first moon or more likely introduce new perturbations. If the two moons' gravitational forces were not perfectly aligned or synchronized in their effects on Earth's equatorial bulge, they could pull Earth's axis in more complex ways. This could lead to larger and potentially more rapid swings in Earth's axial tilt. Our current tilt of about 23.5 degrees is responsible for our seasons. If this tilt were to vary more dramatically, say, swinging between 15 degrees and 35 degrees over tens of thousands of years, instead of the much smaller variation we experience, the impact on global climates would be enormous. A lower tilt would mean less extreme seasons, milder winters, and cooler summers. A higher tilt would result in far more extreme seasons, scorching summers, and frigid winters. Such shifts would dramatically alter climate zones. Regions that are temperate today could become tropical or Arctic in a geological blink of an eye. The stability that our current moon provides is thought to have been crucial for the development and evolution of complex life. A more variable axial tilt, driven by the complex tug of two moons, might mean a planet with much less predictable, long-term climate patterns. Ice sheets might advance and retreat more frequently and over larger areas. Deserts could expand and contract, and habitable zones for various species would constantly be shifting. This wouldn't necessarily prevent life from arising, but it would create a different set of environmental challenges, favoring organisms that are highly adaptable or capable of migrating long distances. Furthermore, the precession of Earth's axis, the slow change in the orientation of the rotation axis, would also be affected. This cycle influences which hemisphere experiences summer when Earth is closest to the Sun, further impacting the intensity of seasons. With two moons, the precessional cycle could be shorter or longer or more irregular, adding another layer of complexity to long-term climate modeling. The very geology of the planet might also feel the effects. While not causing continents to immediately shift, the constant, slightly varying stresses from two moons pulling on Earth's lithosphere could, over eons, subtly influence tectonic activity. The internal distribution of mass within the Earth, and thus its precise rotational characteristics, would be subject to this more complex external forcing. Earth's spin axis might not just wobble more, but its relationship to the planet's physical surface could even drift more over time, a phenomenon known as true polar wander, further scrambling climate zones and stressing the crust. The Earth, as a dynamic system, from its core to its climate, would be responding to a more intricate celestial rhythm. Number 3. The end of true night. One of the most immediate and visually striking differences in a world with two moons would be the nature of the night sky itself. Our single moon, when full, can illuminate the landscape quite brightly, casting shadows and allowing us to see our surroundings. Now imagine the potential for even brighter nights and far fewer truly dark ones. The second moon was also a significant size, comparable to or even a fraction of our current moon's reflective capability. Then nights, when both moons are up and in bright phases, say both full or both gibbous, would be dramatically illuminated. Combined moonlight could be several times brighter than what we experience from our solitary full moon. This could create a world where night is often more like a perpetual, silvery twilight. Activities that currently require artificial light might be possible with just the ambient glow from these twin celestial lamps. The implications for stargazing would be significant. Just as our full moon washes out fainter stars and makes deep sky objects like nebulae and distant galaxies difficult to see without specialized equipment, a sky frequently lit by two moons would make observing the deeper cosmos a much greater challenge for the unaided eye. Truly dark skies, prized by astronomers and nature lovers alike, might become rare events, perhaps only occurring during nights when both moons are new, or when both are below the horizon simultaneously, or during a total eclipse of one moon by the other, if their sizes and paths align perfectly. Nocturnal animals, already facing evolutionary pressures as discussed, would live in a world where deep darkness is less common. This could affect their camouflage, their hunting strategies, and their navigation. For humans, our own biology is tied to the light-dark cycle. Prevalence of brighter nights could potentially interfere with natural sleep patterns if our ancestors hadn't evolved differently. The hormone, melatonin, which helps regulate sleep, is suppressed by light. Constant, brighter nocturnal illumination might necessitate different sleep adaptations or cultural practices around rest. However, the experience wouldn't always be just brighter. The two moons would have their own orbital periods and phases. This means there would be complex cycles of illumination. Sometimes one moon might be full, while the other is a crescent. Sometimes one might be rising as the other is setting. There would be nights with one bright moon and one dim one, or two moderately bright moons. Quality and direction of light would constantly shift. Imagine shadows cast by two different light sources from different parts of the sky, a disorienting and beautiful sight. There would also be periods of relative darkness. If both moons were new simultaneously, the night would be as dark as our new moon nights, perfect for seeing the Milky Way in all its glory. If one moon was new and the other was below the horizon, similar darkness would prevail. The rhythm of light and shadow throughout the month, or whatever the dominant cycle would be far more complex and varied than the relatively simple waxing and waning of our single moon. It would be a sky of greater extremes, sometimes dazzlingly bright, sometimes profoundly dark, but perhaps with fewer nights falling into the average gentle moonlight we often know. The very feel of the night, its mystery and its allure, would be transformed by this constant, shifting, dual lunar glow. Number 2. A sky full of eclipses and occultations. Eclipses are among the most awe-inspiring celestial events visible from Earth. A total solar eclipse, when our moon perfectly blocks the sun, is a breathtaking, almost spiritual experience. Lunar eclipses, when the Earth's shadow falls upon the moon, paint our satellite in eerie, ruddy hues. With two moons in orbit, the frequency and variety of such events would increase dramatically, turning our skies into a dynamic stage for celestial light shows. Firstly, Solar eclipses would become more complex. Each moon would be capable of eclipsing the sun. If the two moons had different apparent sizes as seen from Earth, due to different actual sizes or different orbital distances, they would produce different kinds of solar eclipses. One moon might produce perfect total eclipses like our current moon does, while the other, if it appeared smaller than the sun, might only produce annular eclipses where a ring of sunlight remains visible around the eclipsing moon. Paths of these eclipses across Earth's surface would also vary for each moon, meaning different regions would experience different types of solar eclipses more or less frequently. Imagine the excitement and scientific opportunity if, within a short span, one part of Earth witnessed a total solar eclipse by one moon, and another part saw an annular eclipse by the second moon. Then there are lunar eclipses. Earth would still cast its shadow into space, and both moons could pass through it. So we'd have lunar eclipses of moon and lunar eclipses of moon depending on their orbital inclinations. These might happen with different frequencies for each moon. But the really novel events would involve the moons interacting with each other. One moon could eclipse or occult the other. If the further moon passed behind the nearer moon, an occultation, its light would be temporarily blocked. If the nearer moon passed in front of the further moon and appeared smaller, it would look like a dark disk transiting across a brighter, larger one. If they were of similar apparent size, one could fully eclipse the other, leading to a moon eclipse, where one lunar disk vanishes behind the other. The visual spectacle of watching one cratered sphere glide across another would be common. Furthermore, one moon could cast its shadow on the other. Imagine looking up at moon, which is full, and suddenly seeing a dark circular shadow begin to creep across its surface. This wouldn't be Earth's shadow, but the shadow of moon B. As moon B passes between the sun and moon A, these interlunar eclipses would add another layer of complexity and beauty to the night sky. The sky would be a constantly changing canvas of transits, occultations, and eclipses involving the sun and two moons. Predictability of these events would be a significant challenge for early astronomers. While the motions would still obey gravitational laws, calculating the precise timing and visibility of eclipses involving three primary bodies, Sun, Moon, A Moon B, plus Earth's viewpoint would require sophisticated understanding and mathematics. Different cultures might attach unique astrological or mythological significance to these varied types of eclipses, especially those where the two moons directly interact. An eclipse of the primary moon by the secondary moon could be seen as a particularly potent omen. The celestial clockwork would be far more intricate, offering a richer, more dynamic, and almost constantly surprising spectacle for observers on Earth. Number 1. Super tides and reshaped coastlines. The most dramatic and perhaps most able consequence of Earth having two moons would undoubtedly be on our planet's tides. Our single moon, along with the sun, exerts a gravitational pull on Earth, creating bulges of water on opposite sides of the planet. As Earth rotates through these bulges, we experience high and low tides. Now, introduce a second moon, and this entire system is supercharged and made vastly more complex. Each moon would independently try to create its own set of tidal bulges. The height and strength of these bulges would depend on each moon's mass and its distance from Earth. Closer or more massive moon would exert a stronger tidal force. Critical factor is how these two sets of tidal forces would interact. When the two moons are aligned in the sky from Earth's perspective, either on the same side or opposite sides of Earth, their gravitational pulls would combine. This would lead to exceptionally high tides, known as super spring tides, far exceeding anything we experience today. Water levels could surge dramatically, inundating vast coastal areas. Correspondingly, the low tides during these alignments would be exceptionally low, exposing huge swaths of the seabed. Conversely, when the two moons are at right angles to each other relative to Earth, their tidal forces would partially cancel each other out. This could lead to unusually weak tides, or super-neap tides, with very little difference between high and low water. However, the overall system would likely be dominated by periods of much stronger tides than we currently have. The frequency of these extreme tides would depend on the orbital periods of the two moons. Instead of the roughly fortnightly cycle of spring and neap tides we know, there could be a more complex, perhaps weekly or even daily pattern of varying tidal extremes. The sheer power of these super tides would reshape coastlines at an astonishing rate. Coastal erosion would be massively accelerated. Cliffs would crumble faster, beaches would be stripped of sand, and then redeposited in new locations with each tidal cycle. River estuaries would be enormous with tidal bores, large waves traveling upriver reaching much further inland, potentially making these rivers saline for many miles from the coast. The landscape of entire continents' edges would be in constant flux. Life in coastal and intertidal zones would face an extreme environment. Organisms would need to be adapted to survive enormous daily changes in water level, salinity, and wave energy. Mangrove forests, salt marshes, and kelp beds would either be restricted to very specific, somewhat sheltered locations, or the species themselves would have evolved incredible resilience. The daily rush of water in and out of bays and estuaries would create incredibly strong tidal currents, making navigation near coasts extremely perilous without detailed knowledge and powerful vessels. Human coastal settlements, as we know them, would be almost impossible in many areas. Cities would have to be built much further inland, or on very high ground, or possess colossal sea defenses far beyond anything conceived today. Ports and harbors would require incredible feats of engineering to remain functional. The rhythm of life for coastal communities would be dictated not just by one moon, but by the complex interplay of two, creating a world where the ocean's breath is a powerful and often overwhelming force of nature. The very map of the world would look different, sculpted by the relentless amplified dance of dual lunar tides,